The would-be 36th President of the United States, Lyndon Baines Johnson, was born in a small rural town in Texas called Stonewall on August 27, 1908. Stonewall is not far from Johnson City, which was settled by his family. He knew how it felt to grow up in rural poverty, and he had a keen sense of compassion for both those who live in poverty and those who were discriminated against. He taught Mexican Americans in Cotula, Texas, and attended Southwest Texas State College, now known as Texas State University. He married Claudia Ladyburg Taylor in 1934 and with her help won a seat in the United States House of Representatives in 1937 as a New Deal Democrat from Texas. During World War II, LBJ, as he's affectionately called, served briefly in the U.S. Navy as a lieutenant commander and received a Silver Star. In total, he was elected to United States House of Representatives 6 terms and finally moved up to the Senate in 1948. Johnson won his bid for the Senate with the slightest of margins. He won his Senate seat with just 87 votes in an election where 1 million votes were cast. He was considered to be a moderate liberal that pushed forward some of the most progressive social laws in U.S. history to help the poor and the disadvantaged. Lyndon B. Johnson became the youngest minority leader in U.S. Senate history in 1953. The next year, the Democrats won control of the Senate and he became the majority leader. He is said to have a rare legislative skill and was able to pass a good number of legislation or laws during the Eisenhower administration. Some argue that he was the most powerful majority leader of the 20th century. In 1960, Johnson ran to be the Democratic Party's nominee for president, but lost to the young charismatic John F. Kennedy. In an effort to keep the party unified, John F. Kennedy offered Johnson the vice presidency. Johnson did not want that slot, but took it anyway because of its loyalty to his party and its core values. Then on November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. And on that solemn fateful day, Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as the 36th President of the United States aboard the Air Force One. It is said that, like a true Texas cowboy, he stormed into the presidency with guns ablaze, shaking the whole of Washington with the sheer force of his personality. His primary goal and objective was to simply build a more fair and open America, a vision he called the Great Society. Luckily for him, he had a democratically controlled Congress just filled with congressmen who owed him loyalty and lots of favors. With this congressional support, he declared war on poverty and pushed wide-ranging series of bills and programs including Medicare, expanded aid to education, environmental protection laws, food stamps, Head Start, National Public Radio, the public broadcasting system, consumer protection laws, and a whole collection of anti-poverty programs which cut the percentage of poverty in half. Furthermore, he has sponsored the largest civil rights program since the Civil War and is responsible for passing open housing, which allows housing for everyone regardless of race, and the awesome 1965 Voting Rights Act, which has helped minorities vote in states which have tendencies to make laws that try to block their vote by any means. Under his administration, the United States made great strides in the space program, which he had championed since the beginning. In December 1968, 3 American astronauts orbited the moon on board Apollo 8 and they became the first to leave the Earth's orbit. Johnson congratulated and said to them, "You've taken all of us, all over the world, into a new era." 7 months later, the Apollo 11 mission saw men walk on the moon for the first time in history. The U.S. war in Vietnam was a commitment that the United States had since the Eisenhower and Kennedy administration. Johnson continued their efforts to stop communist aggression and committed more U.S. troops in an attempt to influence peaceful settlement. However, it wasn't meant to be. Soon the nation turned away from this war effort and protests over war became loud and widespread. I think it's time we stop, children, what's that sound? On March 31st, 1968, Johnson stunned the world when he decided not to run for re-election.
Accordingly, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Lyndom B. Johnson, this great Texan, died in the same town he was born in, Stonewall, Texas. He died at his ranch on January 22, 1973, of a heart attack. He was 74 years old. Lyndom B. Johnson's legacy spans numerous areas, but he is most known for his devotion to equality. He helped protect minorities' right to vote by pushing for and signing the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Johnson once said, "I want to be the president who helped to end war among the brothers of this earth." He fought for equality by combating poverty and passing numerous legislations, including anti-poverty laws, Medicare, food stamps, expanded aid to education, and Head Start. He protected all Americans by passing environmental and consumer protection laws. Furthermore, Johnson helped mankind reach and walk on the moon. He fought a war against communism, only to have to leave that civil war to the people of Vietnam. He did that under pressure from the American public to bring back their sons, brothers, and dads.
Not just because Medicare and Medicaid have lifted millions from suffering, not just because the poverty rate in this nation would be far worse without food stamps and Head Start and all the great society programs that survive to this day. I reject such cynicism because I have lived out the promise of LBJ's efforts. Because Michelle has lived out the legacy of those efforts. Because my daughters have lived out the legacy of those efforts. Because I and millions of my generation were in a position to take the baton that he handed to us. Because of the civil rights movement. Because of the laws President Johnson signed. New doors of opportunity and education swung open for everybody. Not all at once, but they swung open. Not just blacks and whites, but also women and Latinos and Asians and Native Americans and gay Americans and Americans with a disability. They swung open for you and they swung open for me. And that's why I'm standing here today, because of those efforts, because of that legacy.
Lyndom B. Johnson lived life to the fullest and was a figure as big as his native Texas. He is hailed and beloved by minorities and by the poor for being their champion and giving them a fighting chance in this race called life.